Okay, thank you, and good morning to everybody. I see some young and old colleagues in the audience. I'm one of the younger ones, but anyway. It's always a difficult task, especially now. KwaZulu-Natal is facing a lot of poaching pressure, which I hope to give you some sort of explanation as to what's going on. But there are, and as Pete quite wisely put, that there's a lot of good effort out there that's happening, especially in the field, at all levels, including support from the organisation and private. So there's a lot of effort that goes into combating this crime. In terms of an overview, we're starting to look in terms of national as well as redefining rhino poaching into wildlife trafficking. It is a national crime, it is an organised crime, and that has huge implications in terms of how you combat it, and I'll give you a little bit more detail later on. We've been typically approached in terms of the conservation manner. In other words, it'll be per protected area or per section or per area or per province, and that's how we tackle it. But as I'll show you, the whole profile of rhino poaching has changed, especially for KwaZulu-Natal, and I do speak for our province. That doesn't allow you to concentrate parochial in certain areas. They will concentrate in certain areas, but you've got to combat it differently. Organised crime is able to exist in corrupt environments. This is an accepted fact. It's in the National Intervention Plan that we have to look at corruption at all levels, not only just in the law enforcement capacity, but there's all sorts of corruption that allows organised crime to operate in. And then rhino crime must be addressed at all levels. Often we have Ezemvelo in the media, and whether it's right or wrong, I'm not even going to go down that road, but it's important to note that rhino crime exists all the way up to an international level. And we're but one part of that whole problem, and we're the last defense before they actually get to the animal. So we're promoting from a national point of view that we got to address this at a national and international level as well, and to get some success in those areas. We often use poached rhino as the measure. In other words, how many rhino we lost, though. We've got, and it's always how many, what's your poaching mortality and so forth. We believe that this has no direct reference to the population status. In other words, I went to a meeting where it was reported quite proudly by a policeman that they had got their poaching rate down to 0. In other words, they had no animals that were poached in a certain period. And the one question I asked was, how many have you got left? And they said, oh, well, we've only got about 10 left after, how many others. So it can be miscued as a measure, and we need to address that. What has happened in the province recently, and I'll give you the time frames. This was in the past. A lot of the effort was concentrated into Kruger National Park, coming in through Mozambique. What has happened now, there's huge syndicates that have developed here and in the Gauteng area. And since about July, August last year, that has all turned around and focused back into KZN. This is the heat map of the rhino crime in the province. And as you can see, it all forms down to Shushliwi and Mfolozi Park. That could be for a number of reasons. There was a lot of dehorning of private populations. There was also a lot of other law enforcement things. There was, this is the trafficking route, and of course they come into Shushliwi and Mfolozi Park. What does the data show us? This is the threat analysis. In other words, the poaching pressure is the red, and of course the green is the numbers of animals that we've lost. This is just pure poaching pressure year on year, and it's trying to push there that you can see here in the September October 2016, it started increasing, and that's when we started getting in Mpumalanga suspects that we started arresting in the province. So this is a direct correlation to the poaching pressure in the province. As soon as they arrived, it escalated exponentially. What did they bring? They brought a new type of poaching effort. In the past, we had local informer networks. In other words, we had our informers in various groups, but all locally set up. This had to change because the poaching effort was now coming from Mpumalanga. One of the biggest changes was that they weren't only integrating with the local poaching networks, but they were supporting themselves with the local criminal networks. So in other words, they wouldn't choose a local known poacher to access the game reserve. They'd go to the taxi industry if there was criminal syndicates within the taxi industry, and those are the people that would transport them in. All the poaching effort is planned in Mpumalanga. They'll leave most probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon, get here, poach an animal, and before 12 o'clock they're back in Hazyview. So there was no ability for us to then, get that information. All the poaching effort was at night. So that's all moved, and it's moved right through the moon phase, and I'll show you that a little bit later. There's also significant money in poaching now. So it's not the squirrel vehicle that rocks up to the boundary of the fence. They come in 3 to 4 cars. They're not always, cars that are known to us because they rent cars. So we would get information that such and such a vehicle is left. We would look for that vehicle. That doesn't happen anymore. So it can be any vehicle. The vehicle that we arrested last night was a rented Fortuner, which is, quite a luxury car. And there was 3 of those types of vehicles in this province last night. They're well trained. They look after their shooters. They cherish. They travel in different cars, so they know we look for the firearm. The shooter will not travel in the same car as the firearm. So they will just come down in another vehicle. They're looked after. The guns are not left here. They're taken back because they're scared that the guns are going to be used by somebody else. So there's a lot of competition in amongst the syndicates. There's sustained incursions. In other words, they come down at any one time. Sometimes in Shishlui and Mfolozi Park, we have 3 to 4 gangs inside the park that we're chasing. There's also decoys. We know that there's decoys that are thrown us. In other words, a shot will be fired in the eastern part. In the meantime, they're entering on the western part. This is the data for the year 2017 to date. It's basically our threat, and we measure our threat by shots fired, information of incursions, tracks, and so forth. And this is the blue line here is the moon phase. You can see there is some correlation. This is when we were very hard to hit this year, but you can see right through the moon phase that there's activity in the province, specifically around HRP. This is the months of the year, so again it all correlates to the point that we came under huge poaching pressure June, July, August, and September. Just a point here, here's these pink little dots are our arrests. Part of our strategy is to get the firearms or get the people before they get to the park. And these are the number of arrests that we have outside these areas here. So you can see that's the route that comes up and how we got to manage that from a law enforcement perspective. In terms of the data, we're sitting at, as of the 5th of November, at 202 animals in total that we've lost, and as Pete quite rightly puts, that we are starting to look at it as 2 different areas. This is the similar thing, it's just that the animals in terms of the black rhino and then of course the white rhino. In terms of the animals lost, this is a breakdown in terms of the month. So you can see this is the date that we find the carcass. We keep the other information as well because it does correlate to incursion at the date of death. But this is the date when we found the animal, so it relates to the investigation in terms of the case number. And this is per month, and as you can see, that's when we lost a lot of the animals. Here we found a lot of old carcasses that we believe were poached over there. So if you look at it, we have had a slight decline over the thing, but you've got to be very, very wary. Here we had some significant arrests, and there was some significant contacts inside Shushluga and Pelosi Park, and as you can see, it does have a impact armed guards, Mr. Barativi. Just in case you want to challenge that in your presentation. But that's what it is, and you can see there, when you look at the data in terms of the poaching pressure, there is also a decline. This is just the heat map of where the carcasses were found in the province. In terms of interventions, what are we doing? We are looking at it from a national level now. We are positively engaging with environmental affairs and with sandparks and with the other nature conservation authorities in the province, and we are looking at how we can integrate our efforts to combating this crime. Just from our perspective, our poachers and suspects are sitting in Mpumalanga. Now they are moving. We've had news that they've moved to Eastern Cape, they've moved to Free State and to Limpopo. So they are not stagnant, they will move around. They came back to us this week, and we managed to arrest one of the syndicates, but they come back. That is the key issue. And they're operating nationally. They're not only in this province. All levels must be combated in terms of the investigations and the prosecutions. A lot of the times, because we are arresting for possession of firearm, and that's one of the major differences between ourselves and Kruger National Park, is that they get suspects inside the park with firearms, so it's trespassing, hunting within a protected area. A lot of our arrests are outside the park with a firearm. Now that are not, unless we can point and ballistically link to a rhino case, they treat it as a possession of firearm case. So we've got to resolve those issues, and we are working with the prosecution authority to do that. Just in terms of the sustainable funding, we have to find a model to sustainably fund the thing. It's very, very expensive. Donor money does come in, but it is erratic, and they will fund what they want to fund. I don't mean that in any other negative way, but we've got to find a sustainable funding model on all levels. In terms of, we've got to have specialized national detective services that focus on these syndicates and not only at a local level. In terms of our interventions, we've got to look at what we use. So what we try to do is this is the probability of how we would detect, catch, or arrest, and then we've got to find out what has the best impact. So if you look at capturing an illegal, these are the mechanisms best used for that. Just in terms of this helicopter, all our helicopters are only daylight hours. We're now moving over to night hours. So we're trying to make sure that all of our operations combat the situation that arises. In terms of the better we do, this is just a graph to say the better we do, the higher the price goes up. And this is the level that we impact on. So we've still got all of these other 4 levels here that we need to address, and that's part of what we're trying to address with national. In terms of our model, we do operate on a state system. It is official. We operate with an intelligence coordinating committee, which all our information goes into. We then assign it to whether it goes to an investigation, into a project for national or international attention, and then of course reaction. So all our information is verified, assessed, and actioned. In terms of national initiatives, we're busy with crime prevention at a national level now. We work very closely with sandparks, we work very closely with DEER and the other provinces where we are now trying to amalgamate our information. For the first time, we're trying to share information. So we're getting a long way, and a number of our good arrests have been through this specific thing where we're liaising very closely with national. In terms of the national strategy that needs to be implemented, and it will guide us and it will give law enforcement to the police and to the correct agencies. This South African Police Service is a national operation. It only operates in Limpopo, Kruger, and KZN. I know they are thinking about spreading it to other provinces as well. And then, of course, we do need that sustainable funding model. Joint initiatives. In terms of the national suspects, we are looking at from a provincial point of view. We're verifying them, and we now going into actual implementing of joint operations. In terms of the support, canine, night operations, we are talking with sandparks on how we can cooperate with that so we can have joint operations. And then, of course, local initiatives. We're looking at joint key protection of areas, commonly known as RPZs. We are looking at it. We're looking at the use of technologies, sensors. Hence, you'll start hearing about smart parks. We need to ensure that our parks are connected. Okay, thank you very much. I've been told to stop.